HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate.
Full send with the driver? Check. Piercing iron through the wind? Check. Low checker, high spinner, flop to a tight pin? Check, check, and check. No matter what shot you need to pull off, there's one ball that's better for them all. The all-new TP5 and 5X from TaylorMade. With a newly redesigned dimple pattern, engineered for more distance, more control around the green, and better stability in the wind, it's the hottest tour ball in golf. So no matter what shot you face, there's one ball that's better for all. The TP5 and 5X from TaylorMade.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth with your host, Diane Helbig. Diane is a leading small business development and leadership coach, author, and speaker who is passionate about sharing valuable ideas, tips, and techniques with business professionals worldwide. Diane brings you the world's experts and gurus in all things business. Whether it's sales, structure, social media, planning, or plateauing, guests bring their expertise and energy to each episode. When growing your business is your focus, Accelerate Your Business Growth is the show to listen to. Got a topic or guest suggestion? Let Diane know. The goal is to make sure you have the information you need to move your business forward. Thanks for joining us. Settle in and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. Audible.com is a leading provider of audio entertainment and information. Listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Get a free book when you sign up for a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/businessgrowth. Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast continues to enjoy inclusion on lists of the best podcasts to listen to. And this is really because of the great guests who I have had the honor of speaking with over the years. These are folks who have expertise in a particular area of business, and they join me to have a conversation where they share that expertise with all of you. You can take whatever you need. You can leave the rest if you would like. It is always here for you to come back and listen again or pick up on something that maybe you didn't listen to the first time because at that point it wasn't relevant. But this information is always here for you so that you can do better things in your business. Today is no exception. Today my guest is Bill Gallagher. Bill is an international business coach with over 30 years of entrepreneurial and executive experience. Bill has coached and trained others for the last 15 years and led 4 companies of his own. He was also a partner and executive in 2 others. Today he coaches teams across over 25 cities in 11 countries and hosts the renowned Scaling Up Business podcast. He has created and run companies and divisions from the start up to over $500 million. Bill learned the Rockefeller habits and scaling up 20 years ago as a CEO and has used them to scale. Thanks so much for joining me today, Bill.
Thanks for having me on.
I am thrilled to have you here. We're going to be talking today about mistakes that CEOs make, and I want to dive right into that subject and ask you, what would you say are the biggest mistakes that CEOs make?
Well, so we've distilled down 7 biggest common recurring mistakes by surveying and talking with the couple hundred coaches that we have around the world, working with thousands of companies over years now, both in our private client coaching as well as our workshops and summits and that kind of thing. We see the same things again and again. When the coaches talk, we're like, oh yeah, that one did this, that one did that. So we see a lot of the same things again and again. And I suppose you could boil it down to one big idea first, and that is that you deserve the company you have right now, or you have the company you deserve. So all of the mistakes that we see in these top mistakes have given you what you have today. And if you want to level up your company, which is what scaling up is all about, the tools and practices that help companies to scale successfully, you also have to level up yourself. So that's kind of the overarching thing. But the top 7 ones are things like failure to look in the mirror, reluctance to make important changes. You've got the wrong people still hanging around. You're a terrible delegator. You're bad at empowering people. You don't hold people accountable. You're unfocused and easily distracted. You're focused too much on operational and tactical things, and you don't work on your culture enough. So those like a rattling off of the top 7.
So those are so great. When you were saying them, I was thinking, yeah, every single one of them. It makes so much sense to me. Okay, so why do we, I will include myself in this even though I'm a one-man band, why do we make these mistakes? Like, is there something about being a CEO, or is there something about being at that level of leadership that gets in our way? What's going on here?
Right. So there's maybe like a character defect or a flaw or affliction that has us be CEOs and leaders. But I think the patterns are more about being human. So starting as a child, we develop survival things. We learn that we're good at this and not so good at that. And so we do more of what we're good at. We try to hide and cover up the things that we're not so good at. And we get by in life. And we start to figure out our place and what we hunger for and what we want. But all of the kinds of ways that we interact with other human beings, that we deal with problems, all of that are patterns that repeat and build over time. The benefit of looking at your 7 mistakes is that you, by increasing the self-awareness there, we have an opportunity to develop beyond them and not to simply be stuck in that repeat cycle, right? Right.
And a lot of them sound like they are leadership problems, like when you were saying, the wrong people are still there. They're bad delegators. They don't know how to empower people, right?
Right.
That feels to me like the way that they interact with people is missing something or is misguided or something.
Right. So the number one is overarching and for sure, like the umbrella one, it's the failure to look in the mirror. So you're like, look, I am richer than all my friends. I've grown it to this point. I've survived all this crap. And who the hell are you to tell me? And that's a lack of self-awareness, an ego unchecked. A little bit of ego is great. Too much, unrestrained, creates a problem. Pretending to listen, pretending it's self-development, doing as you please, all of these things can get us in trouble or just leave us with kind of a plateaued place. Like we get to this place and we have trouble advancing beyond it. So the first thing is really taking a hard look in the mirror, which really goes to the whole framework. But I was working with head of a company, several $100 million, international presence, accomplished, prestigious, doing good things in the world. Their product is beneficial. and the desire of the CEO is really to grow and create a company with legacy to pass on to the next generation. You didn't really want to exit, but wanted to create some legacy and continuity. Well, the problem was, as we went to implement the framework, he kept undoing things. He couldn't control himself, couldn't cut his people loose. And so he would undo the things and he would poo-poo them and be like, well, but you read the book before you hired us as a coach, right? This is what we're doing. We're doing this. He's like, oh yeah, that's fine for them, but not for me. And I see lots of different versions of that. I had another one, CEO of another fairly large firm, hundreds of millions of dollars again, and they had grown rapidly and now we're plateauing. We have the CEO who'd fire off emails to people at 3 a.m. saying, hey, I'd like to talk about this in the morning meeting. So now an executive wakes up at 6 or whenever they wake up in the morning, and the first thing, and they reach for their iPhone and or whatever it is, right? And they look at it and they're like, crap, now I've got to get something ready by 9 a.m. And it's just on the sort of the delusional obsessions of a 3 a.m. CEO. And that doesn't lead to anything either, like trying to burn it at all hours and stressing your people out with heroics and crazy emergencies. It's more of the same.
Yeah, this is so gosh, how do I want to ask this question? I just keep having like flashbacks of CEOs
Yeah.
I worked for in the past. And so are you saying that they have to develop self-awareness in order to be able to identify their role in what's going on and in order to be able to change it and fix it?
For sure. So with our private client coaching work, we're working on implementing the Rockefeller habits, the scaling up framework in a company, right? We're leading the quarterly planning, the annual offsites for strategy work, all those kinds of things. So a lot of that's focused on the application of tools and frameworks for growth. Where the coaching comes in and where it benefits just versus having, say, like video guides or whatever, is you want to have somebody who's helping to hold the mirror up to you to say, look, stop it. Stop sleeping in your office and working 24 hours a day. That doesn't actually help you or the team. If your building's on fire, if you're in a particular crisis, but if that's your regular way of operating, it's not going to work. So the coach provides the training and the stuff in general, and then the reflection. So if you don't have a coach, fine, not everybody's going to have a coach. We're not going to be able to work with everybody. It's not going to be a fit. But get somebody who will tell you what you're doing that's crazy, that's not your spouse or your mom, right? All right, definitely our spouses and our moms know what's wrong with us. And if we would just do that, like and yet it doesn't actually make any difference, right? Your mom and your spouse have been telling you forever what to do to fix yourself, it doesn't make a difference until you see it for yourself. So you want to find the way, somebody that you're going to listen to, or something that reveals it. So it could be a peer group, it could be a close friend, a confidant, it could be a mentor. Get somebody who will help you to see your blind spots.
Got it. I just think that is so incredibly valuable for people, because it's really hard to do. I mean, really hard to do, because they're blind spots, right? For some reason, we like to point outwardly toward a cause of a problem instead of first looking in and going, okay, wait, could I possibly be doing something here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to start with the person in the mirror, right?
Yeah. Right.
They
Usually,
could be like an assessment interview. We'll have leaders go and interview their peers, team members, subordinates, that kind of thing, about who they are. And try to see it from the eyes of the others and really give others permission to give you honest feedback. So that's one of the first things. We'll also have people do formal kinds of things like 360 reviews or go to their, if they are part of a peer group like a forum or mastermind, they could go to that group. And then just the mantra of it's all your fault. If you just remember that, that is both depressing and liberating, right?
Yeah, right.
It's
right.
liberating and empowering because you can do something about you more easily than anyone else. It's depressing, of course, because you can't just blame somebody else.
Right, exactly. You have to own it. Okay. So, oh gosh, see, I'm sort of struggling with how I want to ask the question because I don't want it to be really too general. But is it hard for the employees, or let's say just the leadership team, to find a way to sort of clue in the CEO that maybe not necessarily saying, hey, listen, you're the problem, but there might be a different way to get the result that they're looking for? Is that hard for them to do in this sort of situation?
Well, unless the ultimate leader gives them permission to do it, asks for it, looks for it, there's going to be no room to do it, right? So when I start to work with a CEO and a leadership team, I one of the things I first do early on is have them go interview the people around them. So you have to ask for it. If you're not asking for it, and if your CEO is not seeking some feedback, you're not going to be able to say, look, you're a jerk. Or you're shooting yourself in the foot. They don't want to hear that. So they have to look for it. And if you're that person, at best you could do is model it, right? Sometimes we go to work on ourselves and all the people around us change. So let's say that you're a C-suite leader, or even a leader of a group or division or something like that, but you're not the ultimate leader. If you model something and it's effective, then that might actually create an idea for somebody else, right? I've done things to develop myself and then had my family members be like, oh, wow, I want a piece of that, right? Like, they want to repeat that. So being an example of something is always a good idea.
Well, that is for sure. Are there other examples of these mistakes and the impact that they have that would help the listeners see themselves?
Yeah. So let's take the next two and bridge them, tell a little bit of story around them. So was working with a CEO of a company that really wanted to grow, and they'd grown before and then they'd flattened out. And I really see people in two categories most of the time that reach out to us. They either were growing and then get flat, and so they want to grow again, or they are growing like crazy and they're trying to deal with the growth, right? They're drowning, they're treading water, they're flailing around, their family is suffering. So it's either they want to grow or they want to deal with growth. Those are the two problems that we help solve. But in the course of that, right, in your own efforts to do that, there are probably things that occur to you, like it's obvious in the process you need to make some changes. So you see it, it's clear, and yet you don't act. And one of the key things there, going to number 3, is it's about people. So we see something going on. So I've got a CEO. It's clear that they're undercutting they're underpricing their goods and services, and they realize they need to raise prices, but they delay. They do studies, they hire consultants, they're slow to implement, they have internal arguments about aspects of it. So it becomes clear, and now we need to be bold and take action. And in this case, it did turn around for the company I'm thinking of, because they finally did push it, but God, we could have gotten the profitability and the cash up faster had the action come sooner. Another one similar, they wanted to grow. They'd been flat. The cash was okay. It was always their model was a little challenged on the cash side. But the first concern was the growth. But their head of sales was never going to sell. He was completely comfortable. He wanted to talk about his past and his career and all the amazing things he'd done, but they were friends. So this CEO took over a year to let go a person that was abundantly clear needed to go. So if you're not letting go the bottom quarter or at least a few percent of your people on a regular basis and developing and moving towards an A-player team, then you're going to have a problem. So the wrong people hanging around, and there are lots of reasons that we do that. We could have somebody who's producing great numbers, but is kind of toxic, is a mismatch to the environment. We can see they're creating problems along the way. Or we could have somebody who's completely comfortable, who no longer is performing. So we've got to figure out how to get rid of the people who don't fit the company. We had another one, a CEO with actually I see this again and again. They recruited somebody with a terrific resume, outstanding, proven results across years in a variety of related companies in similar industry. And then the person was failing in their role in this earlier stage company. Well, they just were not a fit to that kind of company at that stage. And it was really clear, like within a few months, a year later, the person is still there because they were like, well, we've got so much invested and they're maybe going to turn it around. And I mean, we see it in operational roles and sales roles again and again, this same kind of thing. So it could be you're friends with them, which is really hard, or you just don't like to fire people, or you know, any number of things like that. But the mantra is hire slow, fire fast. But there's very few that do that. Now, even if you fire fast, you want to do it carefully, thoughtfully, responsibly, legally, but because doing other kinds of things can put your company at risk.
Right.
But when you know somebody's wrong, it's time to go. And by the converse, when I think about it, so I had a company that we'd come in, there was an acquisition, there were some new management hires. Within 3 months, it was pretty clear that those people had their own ideas about everything. They weren't going to play nicely with the other kids. And although they were like, oh, I know a better way, they weren't actually winning or using the things that they said. So it became clear at about 4 months in, the company, the board, and the ownership made a decision to cut those folks. And almost immediately, we saw an uptick in the results. The team started working together better. That company did a 4x growth in a couple of years. So making the time and again, we see the companies that make clear, bold, thoughtful changes of people do a lot better.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you talked about that, because I think what leaders either fail to see or don't pay attention to or forget or whatever it is that everyone there knows what's going on. Like, everyone in the company knows who shouldn't be there. And the longer you keep someone who shouldn't be there, the worse the morale gets for everybody.
Yep. Why do they keep this jerk around, right?
Right, exactly. Being paid the same I am, he's doing half the
or
work,
more.
he's toxic. Just it is. And what is it? Because they don't like confrontation? Is it because they think they can't live without the person? Like they won't be able to replace them?
Right. Well, there's a book on this, No A-Holes Rule, but you don't really need to read the book. You get the idea. Get rid of people. Here's the thing. I think that the vast majority, nearly every human being on the face of the earth could be an A player somewhere, that A players are situational. So
Yeah.
If you do share a similar belief, then you're not only doing your company a disservice, you're doing them a disservice. And look, I've made
Right.
all of these mistakes myself, but the longer I hang on to someone in a place and in a role where they are never going to win, and I know in my heart there's no way for me to get them winning, and I don't know what to do, it's not the right thing, I can't do it, they can't do it, it's time to move on. And when you cut them free, now they have an option and ability to go find a place that's better suited. They may or may not do that. And the transition may be difficult, right? Transitioning out of a job or that kind of thing is a difficult thing, but this alone can get things working better, right? Just get rid of the people who don't belong there and trust that there is a way to deal with it. So just do it thoughtfully and carefully and then move on. And sometimes you might need to outsource a role or bring in a temp or do something like that. But sometimes the creative things will just make a profound difference very, very quickly. And you just have to hold it and encourage that person to go find a place where they can win, where they can thrive, right? And then of course it's up to them. They're adults. They're ready to do that thing. But don't keep people around because you don't have the stones to get the job done, because you're uncomfortable with confronting the thing or whatever. It's going to do everyone better in the process. And certainly don't do it out of fear of the implications. I can't tell you how many times I wish that I had made that sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick sponsor break and then continue the conversation. Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is happy to be sponsored by Audible.com. Audible.com is a leading provider of spoken digital audio entertainment and information. They have over 150,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen to them on any device, including whatever you're hearing us on right now. And if you sign up at our link, which is audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, you get one free audiobook and a 1-month trial of the service. Some examples of books you can listen to on audible.com are Do Business Better by Damian Mason and Breathe to Succeed by Sandy Abrams. So visit audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, explore the books that are of interest to you, and receive one free audiobook when you sign up for the trial. Today we're speaking with Bill Gallagher about the mistakes CEOs make. So I wanted to circle back and ask you a question about changes that happen too slowly. And I'm curious about what causes that. Is it that they're afraid to make a change because they're afraid it's going to be wrong, or can they just not stop and really just take a moment to make a decision? Because you would think leaders are decisive.
Yeah, and sometimes right and sometimes wrong, but there's a contribution of being decisive in itself. By the way, our book Scaling Up is on Audible as well. So
excellent. Wonderful. Thank you.
So in the meeting rhythms that we recommend and using the process in the book, it becomes very clear the decisive, like what the decision ought to be, right? And you can have confidence in it when it's held by the group. Then the thing to do is to empower yourself and the group to actually make the decision. And I think it's less about making the decision than it is taking action. I think very many times in our coaching sessions and our offsites, it's like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then we don't do it. So we make a decision in a moment, but then we waver on it later. And you would think that the decision is the final end, but we're human beings. And then right after we make that decision, then we have a fear, a thought, or but how about what if? And then we back down from that thing and we don't take the action, right? So I think that's definitely an issue. And then that it does dovetail then into the next one. And we get distracted by stuff, especially our founding CEO types, the entrepreneurial types who have a little visionary piece. We are by nature, and I'm speaking about myself in the group, unfocused and easily distracted. So, sometimes I just pick up my phone to check one little thing, and then I looked at 4 other things on my way to checking that, and I've completely forgotten what it is, and it's 20 minutes later.
Yeah. It's like an occupational hazard.
Right. So there is something to that, especially if you're on that like visionary leadership side, where you're creative and strategic and new ideas present themselves. And then you're like, well, where does this one go? And should I chase this one down? And what was I working on?
Yeah.
So that can also get in the way of that focus. But if you use the good execution habits, so execution habits are setting priorities as a team, right? Having great metrics and dashboards to keep progress visible, and then having the right kind of meeting rhythms to go back and look at. So are your meeting rhythms predictable? Consistent? Do they come first, or are they always whenever you can fit them in, and so therefore they don't really happen with any regularity? But if you have those kinds of habits, then it's easy to look back on and see, okay, this needs to be addressed. And if you use a team well and bring some self-awareness to that, going back to number 1, then you can actually take the action and follow through on the things that you ostensibly decided earlier on.
Okay. So how do we figure out what part of the business to focus on next?
Yeah. So the focus for the business, I think really that is the combination of the strategic and the execution side. So if you're clear about sort of the enduring core things in the world of strategy for us. So that would typically be things like, what's the purpose of the company, the why statement, right? So ours is, we help leaders build a better world. And then your values. So 5 values that define how you operate, not how you wish you'd operate. They're not aspirational. They are, in fact, description of your best traits in practice, not your weaknesses and not the things that you are maybe never fail to do, but the way that you operate on a regular basis when you're doing good work. So in our case, it's like courageous authenticity and think and ask why, and never finished, and laughter, especially at ourselves. These are the kinds of things that define how we should approach creating is living. How we should approach the problems that we address. That's the why and the how. And then what? So we're out to impact 5 million business leaders before I retire. And it was very personal because it's a small company, it's coaching oriented and so on. But I just picked a time horizon out there and I said, that's the mountain we're going to conquer. And I don't know how to get there. But it's interesting, big enough. It's not a pipe dream, to use that idea, that something that's absurd, but it's that balance. So now we know some of these things. Then what do I pick at a 3 or 5 year time frame? What do I pick a year out is a lot easier to decide, right? So once a year we reset kind of that 3-year strategic milestones that we want to hit. What do we want to accomplish 3 years out? And then we create goals for 1 year from now that are way tangible and achievable and practical and all that kind of thing. Very, very clear at the 1 year time horizon. And that we do at about a 1 year cadence. Then every quarter, we just say, okay, what's next for the next 90 days that we're going to focus on? And that is kind of the whole meeting rhythm from the Rockefeller habits and scaling up. How do we figure out what to do next? And then we want to remember it, keep it alive by looking at it every week or so, and having daily huddles, and then keeping those plans visible in our dashboards. So the plans and the priorities from the plans and the metrics are visible on some kind of, and it could be as simple as a whiteboard in a work area, or it could be a more complicated and sophisticated system like some of our online software tools that track progress on things.
There were a couple of things in there that I really, really love, that really hit me. One of them is that it sounds like you put a stake in the ground far out, and then you bring it back to
Start
shorter
with the end in
periods
mind,
of
right?
time. Yeah, right. And then say, okay, but right now I just need to focus on this, because this will take me to the next thing, which will take me to the next thing, and so on and so on and so on, so that I can get there. And you don't simply rely on that you keep track of it and talk about it, and you keep some sort of measure of it visible. I love that visible.
Yeah.
Because then it's real all the time.
Yeah. So this idea with beginning with the end in mind is first made popular. I'm sure it predates quite a bit, is Stephen Covey, right?
Yeah.
And the habits, but we're really, it probably is much, much older than that. But this idea of, I want to impact 5 million people before I retire. And how do I do that is not exactly clear to me yet. So I cannot possibly just describe the next step. It's not a linear kind of an exploration. So I put this stake in the ground. In my case, I did it 30 years out. We recommend doing 10 years. And then you could also do a 20-year kind of thing, but 10 years is really ideal. 5 starts to get way too feasible and practical. People limit what they wish for in that time frame, but 10 years or beyond. So my goal for 5 was a 30-year kind of a goal. It's now becoming clear that I can hit that sooner through leveraging the media and things like that. But I didn't know how to do that initially. I work with about 10 companies a year. And there's 10 leaders per company, so that's like 100. And I work with companies for a couple years. So if I turn them over in that time, I'm only reaching a few, right? Each year. And then of course I do workshops and public things, and you could count those, but it's not until I added in the media piece that I started to impact more people and accelerate that. Now that 30-year vision starts to get clear and become more feasible. But when I first said it, it was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So we begin with the end in mind, and then we work backwards through things, a rhythm of meetings that connects us all the way back through daily actions, and we start to see the connection between things, and it becomes very clear what to do. And as a team, if you do that, then not only are you achieving what you want as the ultimate leader or owner of the business, but you're figuring out how to do it in a way that you couldn't do all on your own. So the really big, interesting things in life we can't do on our own, right? We need to engage teams in order to grow our businesses and to accomplish those things that the ego hungers for.
Yeah, I think this is terrific. One of the things that came into my mind as you were talking about that is we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what changes are going to happen that are going to impact our journey.
Yep.
Our path toward, right? Like as you said, the media wasn't an opportunity necessarily when you started, but then when you look at it and you go, okay, this is what I want to do, this is how it's going, what other avenues do I have? It sounds to me like this process that you have really allows people to think in possibilities, not in finite terms.
Yeah. So we begin with these ideas, these possibilities, and then we come back. In hindsight, a lot of these things seem really obvious. Oh, of course you should do that. But at the time and from the place, they don't seem that obvious.
Right.
I was not at all thinking about or working on stuff. And then one of my forum mates, so forums are peer groups, YPO, EO, have them. Vistage has another group of thing like that, masterminds. So we have a group like that. One of my forum mates said to me, dude, you should have a podcast. You have a background in radio. What the hell? Now, this is a guy who had a big so I started doing podcasts. Then I started to think, oh, maybe I should have a TV show. Now I have a group that we're brainstorming approaches to a TV show.
Right.
Why not?
Right. Like, why not? Right.
Why not? Why shouldn't we do that? But I wasn't thinking of that until I picked a number that was big enough, that was a little both frightening and exciting to say, right? And worth giving my life to.
Yeah.
So if I say that this is what I want to accomplish before I retire, I've essentially dedicated the rest of my working life to something. And that becomes interesting, right? I can say it. I'm like, I don't know how to do it, but it's interesting to me. That's what I'm working on.
Yeah. And somehow I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And I may fail. I may fail in this. I probably won't, but I could fail in this, and it would be worth working at even if I failed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about the role that motivation, fear, self-doubt, what role do they play in everything?
Yeah, because we're human beings.
Yeah.
Hardest part of the business, human.
Yeah, no kidding.
So that goes back actually to number one, right? Failure to look in the mirror. So we are run by fears and doubts and things like that all the time. And then we, if we're not thoughtful, reflective, and looking for our own blind spots, we end up doing kind of the same thing all the time. Then there's no growth and the company stays kind of plateaued. And you end up being the lid on things, right? It starts to bubble up and then you crush it back down again. You pull it back down to the level you're comfortable with. But if you evolve your approach, your leadership and all of that in the process, then, and you keep growing yourself at the same time, then there is an opportunity to grow. Now, sometimes, look, we need to change our role. Like, if you're honest, sometimes you're like, okay, I invented this process, this technology, this whatever, and I really should be in the R&D end of things. I shouldn't be the operating manager of the company, right? I should have a COO, a president or something. Maybe I should even give away the CEO role, and I should just be the mad scientist, right? Who's off creating the next thing. You got to figure out who you are, what makes you happy, and what your role is. And then you got to keep working on stuff. So I said one of our values is never finished. And I have a visual for that. It's this guy, Jack LaLanne. And Jack LaLanne
I remember Jack LaLanne.
Jack LaLanne was a fitness guru, right? Who like worked out till he died. And I love that idea. I actually should know at the top of my head, since I talk about him, what age he died at. But he was very fit until late years, right? So he was a great example of never being finished. And I remember I was getting some training in leadership and workshop stuff, and I watched this guy who was well beyond me fail miserably at something that should be basic and well handled by that point. And then I noticed in some of my own stuff, things that I had developed very well at some point would come unraveled later. I'd start to take them for granted. And I realized, oh, I'll never be done. I'll never be done working on myself until I die. And that's a great way to live, because you sort of give up being finished, getting to a destination, that kind of thing, and you embrace kind of the growth along the way and the process of the journey itself. It's super liberating to let go of that. But before then, I had always kind of had this background fantasy, wasn't always conscious, but that like I would reach some finished, evolved, super glowing state. Maybe I'd levitate like I'd glow and levitate, and then I would be unconcerned with basic things like success and love and abundance, and like I would just, and I let all that go, and it was super empowering. And I think that is the thing that as a leader you got to consider, that these ways, right? You could call them your strengths, they're useful. You just don't want to be limited by them. So the fact that I was smart and articulate and occasionally funny helped me, but it wasn't enough to really give me a fulfilling life. But I'm not going to give them up and stop doing that, like never speak again or whatever. I'm going to use those things forever, but there's something else then. So I got to go and explore, and I got to work on what are the other areas. And then if I know what the weaknesses are, the things that I'm uncomfortable with, how could I let those go, give them away, delegate them, acknowledge them, work around them, create systems for them, right? So that's the evolution of all that. And then I just have to stay in the game on a regular basis. Again, it's like, look in the mirror. Look, am I honestly ready for today or for the next meeting or phone call or whatever? And if I'm not, what's missing?
Yeah. Boy, I totally see how this all starts with the first one, the failure to look in the mirror. I get it. Everything else falls out of that. Yeah, right.
That's for sure the umbrella. But then it's helpful to have you could really stop the list right there. There's only one thing that you need to do, but it's great to have some specific things to look at that we do on a regular basis, right? Like number 7 is not enough work on the culture. So this is that you don't really have core values alive and in practice. They're hardly in use, and we can see this in a company where we walk around and the leaders of the company say, this is what we're all about. When you look around, it looks completely different. And leaders are spending all their time and energy answering small questions from people all the time. When you've got a culture that's built around the values and the purpose, and that reinforces and supports that big, hairy, audacious goal, then you don't have to work as hard. The whole environment starts to create that. And the interesting thing about culture is that the root is cult. And I think you should build a cult.
Yeah.
But you like, not the weird cult that makes you
not the scary one,
separate from the world and drink poison and give up all your goods and that kind of thing, but a good cult, right? So all cultures and the things that we cherish, like you think about whatever tradition, whatever culture that you come from, there are traditions that reinforce values over time, like family, like community, like giving, like honesty. These are present in our various social, ethnic, and religious cultures. But you could create a thoughtful, values-centered culture for your business, and then create little traditions and reinforcements around that. If you did that, then you could actually teach people to think and make decisions based on those values, and you wouldn't have to answer and make decisions on all the minutiae that probably fill your day today.
Do you think CEOs really know what their values are when it comes to where they're taking their company?
Well, the good ones do, right? People that have studied values in the way that we mean them, company values, they don't put up words like integrity, teamwork, communication, innovation, right? These are generic words that are almost table stakes for most companies. They instead look for the creative, evocative, rich words like ours are good examples, right? Courageous authenticity, creating is living, think and ask why. These create a picture of stuff. And there are lots of examples, like you look at some of our success stories, Rackspace, right? These guys had a rich set of values that they used, and fanatical support was at the top of the list, and also a brand promise. And this idea of fanatical then gets enshrined in their culture. And instead of having employee of the month, they have fanatic of the month. They put that person in a straitjacket, right? The jacket for crazy people, and they wrap your arms around it. So, and then they take your picture and they put that on the wall, right? That really reinforces something with play and humor and ritual and uniqueness. So doing the work now, the approach that we take with companies it comes from Jim Collins' work, and the exercise that is typically used is Mission to Mars, and where you think about what are the attributes of your best people. If you're an early stage company or even a startup, the way to do that is to think about who would you love to hire in this company, and who would you never want to hire. And if you take a bunch of those folks and you take the opposites of who you'd never want to hire, and you throw all those words together of their attributes, not the names of the people, but the characteristics and qualities of them that would have you, then you can actually create a rich set of values, right? And we recommend 5, somewhere between 4 and 6 is the absolute max that are meaningful, because people just can't remember them, right? And then you can use
Right.
you can use symbols and imagery, you can use descriptions and slogans, but rich, evocative language. Then you can teach people how to operate consistent with them. You can build little touches and traditions. One of the companies we worked with had a trophy that moved around the office based on the leading value that they had. And when you hit this one, then you got the trophy. And then the next person that hit this in a particular way, then they got the trophy, and it sat on their desk. And others have built various things in to reinforce those. You could do it at onboarding. You could do it in recurring training. You can touch on them in all your meetings. You know, what are the different things that you do? You think about ancient cultures, and there's a rich set of things. Like, first of all, you have to teach them. You teach them to your kids, you teach them to your employees, you teach them when they come in, you teach them on a regular basis. You got to talk about them inside and outside the company. You have to think about them. You have to keep them in front of yourself, visible to yourself. Some of these practices have kept ethnic and religious cultures alive for thousands of years, right? These set of regular practices.
So this is so great, and it, part of what I keep picking up from this is that you can feel it. That culture is something that you experience. It's something
palpable.
You feel. It's not just a bunch of words.
See it, feel it, experience it. It's real.
Yeah. Mhm. And so you know it's there, but then you also know when it isn't there.
Now here's the other clue. And I had this, here's one of our CEOs that failed our process, that dropped. And I would say 1 in 5 to 1 in 4, somewhere around that, have good intentions. They read the book, they want to do it. We begin the process, and then either or both of us decide this isn't going to work out. And so this is an example. This guy says, these are our values. They start with some values. We hone them, refine them in an offsite with the leadership team. Then I walk around the office. I'm like, okay, you, my friend, are a little delusional. Those maybe were your values way back in college, or just as you exited and started this business. But now, 30 years later, that's not the company you have. And what you aren't aware of and aren't addressing is the fact that you've built a production house that is all about low cost volume production. It's expedient. Everything's dropped here and there with no clear thinking. This is not elegant design, right? It's a creative production company, right? Not in remotely. And if I just look at you, I'm like, your hair, the way you tuck in your shirt, there's nothing elegant or creative about you. So this notion that you're like cutting edge creative, you give it up and embrace who you actually are. There's power in that. There's a need for that.
Yeah.
Right? People need that. And that's why you're in business. But if you keep trying to be somewhere you're not, it's a little bit like saying, look, I want to get to LA. So give me the directions from Oakland to LA, except in reality, you're in Sacramento. And so the directions wouldn't work and you're going to get wet.
I love that. Oh my gosh. And it's not really a surprise that he dropped out of it because he just couldn't see it, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah, no, he wasn't interested. He didn't want to hear the truth. Back to number 1, right? Yeah. So
all roads lead back to number 1.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. Wow. This is so great. I really appreciate this conversation and this information. I think it's something that if people are not quite at the self-awareness stage, they can certainly relate to this being on the receiving end of some of these mistakes. Let's say it that way. So would you please tell the listeners what you've got going on? We know you can get the book on Audible, but where else can you get it, and how they can find you, please?
So if you want the physical book, and I know some of us like the physical books still, I have like the Audible books, the physical books, and the books on my iPad, so that I can use them in lots. Not every book I get in 3 modes, but sometimes I do. But if you'd like a physical copy of the book, I'll give you one for free. you can just go to scalingcoach.com, ask for the book. I'll send you a physical book from Scaling Up for free. Of course, we have public workshops, and I speak at conferences and things like that. We do private work, but I only work with a very, very, like 10 companies at a time. So I'm not really out to pitch your listeners to be one of our private clients, but you can get the book. You can learn about it. We do a podcast also every week. We'll talk about this one there as well, and your listeners. But the scalingcoach.com has the free book offer. And of course, if it works for you, come to one of our public workshops and just spend a day with me doing the work, which is a great way to dig a little deeper in some of this stuff.
Boy, no kidding. Thank you so much. And listeners, take them up on it. It's a couple of great offers there. And even though he's not pitching to work with you, but you can certainly learn a lot more just about this subject, which is so incredibly important. Get the book, do some, looking in the mirror. It's all worthwhile. And I would like to thank our sponsor as well. If you would like to get a free trial of audible.com as well as a free audiobook, just go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth to sign up. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Welcome, change agents, to your go-to place for stories that ignite your spirit, fuel your purpose, and connect us all. We believe in the incredible power of the human spirit, its boundless resilience, and the inspiration it brings to our lives. On the Driving Change podcast, we'll journey together through the extraordinary yet very relatable experiences of some of the most amazing people on earth. Our mission? That through these stories, we might just spark change within you and awaken a newfound motivation to harness your unique gifts to make a real difference in the world. So get ready to be inspired and join us on this incredible adventure. You can find the Driving Change podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you love listening to your favorite podcasts.